Hello, everybody. I am going to stop sharing. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Feminist Question Time. Sorry about the sound. Sound wasn't back, but we are back, so that's good. And unfortunately, Bernadette O'Malley, who normally does the tech, is busy today, so that's another reason why we couldn't hear the sound. But anyway, the main thing is we're back, and welcome back, everybody. So that's really fantastic. So thank you for coming. Feminist Question Time is brought to you by Women's Declaration International, which is, in our view, the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. Many of us have been active feminists since the 70s or even the 1960s, and we were not surprised when this new attack on women came along. And we have not essentially changed our analysis. We wrote a declaration on women's sex-based rights in 2018, which lays out our position, and it's been signed by 39,549 people from 160 countries and is supported by 547 organizations. So if you haven't yet looked at it, look on the website womensdeclaration.com and sign it, and also share it and use it to lobby policymakers, to explain to policymakers and politicians, etc., why it's very it's a big threat to women's sex-based rights that gender identity ideology is being acceptable in many places. We have volunteer activists and country contacts from every continent. Do join us. You can find more information on the website. This Zoom webinar is women only, so we ask men to watch later on YouTube. It will be on YouTube in a couple of days' time. We have subtitles, and you can make them small, medium, or large if you press the subtitle button. Now, I'm really pleased to say our program today is I'm just going to get everybody on now. So we have got it for our program today. We have Mariah Burton Nelson, and she is from the USA, and she is going to talk about sports as still a feminist issue, the modern competition with mad men to preserve female-only sports. Then we're going to hear from Jocelyn Crawley. Hi, Jocelyn, who's here as well. And she's from the USA, and she's going to talk about the Brock Turner stroke Chanel Miller case. And so we'll hear from her. And then we're going to have a pre-recorded video from Pliers, who's a Black radical feminist lesbian theorist based in New York City. And she's just published a fantastic book called Black Women and Trans Ideology. And in it, we've got a video from her which outlines some of the concepts in the book, but the book itself is so fantastic. I really recommend everybody read it. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to introduce our first speaker, who is sorry, I'm just adding spotlights. So our first speaker is Mariah.
Mariah.
Mariah. I'm very bad at pronouncing Mariah. Mariah Burton Nelson, who is a former Stanford and pro basketball player focused on the empowerment of women through sports. Her most popular book, The Stronger Women Get, The More Men Love Football, was reviewed in July for radical feminist perspectives, and it's fantastic. So I would highly recommend everybody reading the book. It's very really engaging, very easy to read, and very informative, and you can find it all over the place. It's great. Mariah now writes and illustrates Stronger Women, a weekly Substack. And so thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Mariah, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Joe, and everyone for being here. It's great to get a chance to talk with you today about the empowerment of women through sports, and specifically how we are winning so far in our efforts to preserve female-only sports and spaces. I'm going to, and thank you for that fabulous review, Joe. Of course, I really enjoyed watching it. I'm going to use certain pronouns today, which will probably make you nervous. But my pronouns are we and us. I'm using we and us increasingly these days, I notice, to refer to female athletes and feminists who are leading the movement for female-only sports and spaces. By using the collective first-person voice today, I'm giving my teammates throughout the world credit while reminding you that this is very much a team effort. Okay, so that was not the most graceful transition, but I think that should work okay. So this is a drawing of mine. All the drawings in this presentation are mine. And we are the woman in the front of this bike and also the woman in the back. We are Olympians, professionals, amateurs, students, scholars, lawyers, lobbyists, writers, policy experts. The we I'm speaking from today, though of course I'm not literally representing all of us, but we are Olympians, professionals, amateurs. Oh, I'm sorry, I said that. We are famous athletes. Martina Navratilova, Nancy Hogshead, Donna DeVerona, Linda Blade, Sharon Davies, Chris Evert, Riley Gaines, Mary T. Marr, Pam Shriver, Jen Say, Inga Thompson, and many athletes you have not heard of. But you would not recognize any of those names if we did not have a female category. They would not be Olympians or champions. All would have been
Mariah,
lost to
can I,
history. Yes.
sorry, just checking. We're actually seeing your talk now rather than the
Oh, whoops.
PowerPoint
Okay.
slides.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, which is nice, but I don't know if that's what you want.
Well, yeah, there's the photo. There's the picture I'm trying to show you. Let me start.
Yeah, I mean, I could show the slides that you sent me.
Why don't you? Because I am juggling
Yeah,
3
and then
different
you could just
images.
talk,
Great.
which would be great. So I'm going to show the slides, and then you could just so that will possibly make it easier for you because then you can just do the talking.
Thank
There
you.
we are.
Sorry, I messed
Okay,
that up.
and then
Yep.
just tell no, it's fine. Just tell me when you
Okay.
want the next slide.
Okay. So our first feminist awakening happened at Little League signups. But why not? We asked the big men distributing colorful new baseball caps to our brothers. Because you're a girl, they said. But we knew that was wrong. It wasn't because we were girls, it was because the men were sexist. And in defiance, we played every other sport. Sports are a feminist issue because when we say yes to sports, we say no to oppressive rules about how girls should behave. When we say yes to sports, we learn to put ourselves first, to love our bodies for what they can do and how good they can feel. When we say yes to sports, we develop strength and resilience. We learn to compete and to win, to stand our ground, to trust other women. Men still harass us. You're too competitive, too aggressive, too muscular, too much, too mannish, too selfish, too sweaty, too dykey. Believe me, we've heard it all, as have you, I'm sure, if you're an athlete. But nevertheless, we persist and resist. Brave by nature and by training, we have shaped the course of women's sports just as sports have shaped us. So what I'm going to share today is a success in progress story without the final score. Next slide, please, Joe. Thanks. Yeah. So I can't see the slides you're sharing, but unless there's a way that I can. Could you make them show on your screen, Joe? And you're muted. I can't tell if you're talking back to me. And excuse us, audience, while we
Yeah,
work
so
out this tech difficulty. Yeah,
everyone else, I think everyone else can see them. It says female athletes not born in the wrong bodies.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so today I will tell you what strengths and strategies are working for us as a unified worldwide movement in our quest for female-only sports and spaces. I'll tell you what we've achieved so far and how our success is directly linked to the modern women's rights movement. Next slide, please. So I am best known as an openly lesbian, feminist, women's sports writer, and former Stanford and pro basketball player. But I'm a lifelong recreational athlete too, and fairness for females matters at all levels. Last month, for instance, I competed in a 1 mile swim in the ocean in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. The sea was rough with white caps the entire distance. Many people dropped out, and it was exhausting, but in an exhilarating way. Like almost all sports, this race divided women and men into two categories, of course, because it's well established that men have a performance advantage in pretty much every sport except equestrian events. At 69, I was one of the oldest swimmers in the field of 53 athletes. But fortunately, there were also age categories, as there often are at the youth and masters levels. So I was only competing against women aged 60 to 69. Compared to those women my age, I placed third. New slide, please. And won a bronze medal, which you can see there, proudly hanging from my neck. We love our female category. This is our home, our happy place where we belong. As for what specifically we are doing to protect our sacred sports and spaces, here are 10 of our key strengths and strategies. First, we understand male intrusions into women's sports and spaces from personal experience. We have sat in our coach's car, frozen in shock and confusion, as he placed his hand high on our thigh, inching that hand toward our most intimate of all intimate spaces. We have been tackled by men when we were out running and raped. And Chanel Miller is sort of an example of that, who Jocelyn will speak about later. These men who want access now, they're trying to drag us off course again, trying to insert themselves, trying to manipulate us with bogus arguments and depictions of themselves as victims. Men feel like women, but act like men, displaying male privilege and male bullying to muscle their way past female boundaries. Next slide, please, Joe. These are photos I took of my own locker room in Arlington, Virginia, where males are still allowed to enter if they say the magic open sesame words, "I'm trans." This particular locker room is now the epicenter of a legal conflict between the US Justice Department and 5 school districts in Northern Virginia over whether boys and grown men should be allowed to get naked and watch girls get naked. Note how small these rooms are with nowhere to hide. There's a school community sharing agreement that allows the public to use these facilities too. And I am currently boycotting because they let men in there. Next slide, please. Excuse me. This is the man who sat naked in that locker room last year watching women and girls. One mother I talked with who complained was told that he was allowed to sit there while more than a dozen young girls and women changed and showered because he identifies as trans. I mean, really, what could be more ludicrous, right? Eventually, he was arrested, but only because he was already a registered sex offender. The schools will not change their policy despite the federal pressure. To them, affirming boys' gender identity is more important than protecting girls' and women's safety and dignity. Excuse me. Second, we have facts and common sense on our side. We use 100 years worth of sports data to remind people of the simple, obvious fact that men are bigger, stronger, taller, and faster. We use more recent data to prove that testosterone suppression does not magically turn men into women. We communicate clearly using the words male, men, and boys, even though this gets us canceled from every major media source, rather than trans women, male-bodied people, and assigned male at birth. In the US, we have the law on our side. Excuse me, and this is a US-centric presentation just because I know more about what's happening here, but we do have allies around the world. Also, we understand women's sports. We resent being called the weaker sex because it is used to denigrate us, but truth is we are physically weaker and we know this. When we are not being threatened or assaulted, we do not feel weak. We are not weak. We just need our own sports and spaces. These bodies of ours, with their periods, pregnancies, breasts, and menopause, they were designed to nurture and nurse babies. Next slide, please. Here's Alicia Montano competing at a US championship while 8 months pregnant. Sports taught us how to nurture ourselves and strengthen ourselves and pursue our own dreams while running free. Next slide, please. So here we are protesting. We educate, organize, lobby, and sue. We have formed regional, national, and international organizations. We stage protests, file lawsuits, submit petitions, write amicus briefs, educate policymakers, politicians, and the public, draft new policies, consolidate research, write and publish, and appear in social and traditional media. Having fought first for Title IX in the US, and now still fighting for Title IX enforcement, we use our connections, celebrity, and clout. We also team up in good faith. Despite differences in class, race, nationality, sexual orientation, and politics, we collaborate, including with WDI, Sex Matters, Fair Play for Women, ICONS, the International Consortium for Female Sport, Independent Women's Forum, and many other groups. We work with trans-related male allies, with scholars, with male athlete allies, and with growing numbers of athletes and parents who have seen the negative effects of gender ideology up close. Next slide here, please. Note the size difference in these 4 athletes. Note the obvious strength difference. These people are the same age and on the same team. So we use visuals like this because already sports are visible, popular, and powerful. They incidentally convey the message that men and women are different. We use these images to educate and to generate outrage. Next slide, please. So guess which one of these divers in a racing dive in the NCAA championship 3 years ago, 2022. Guess which one is Leah Will Thomas, the so-called women's champion? Hint, she is 6'4", and males have a 20% advantage in leaping. Next slide, please. And here you can see how women's sports have really, unfortunately, much to our dismay, become a farce. Once you add these people, and it doesn't take much to notice their genitals and their height and their strength. And in one case on the right, that's a man way older than the girls he's playing with. You can see how it has become a farce, as well as really a tragedy as far as we are concerned. So to counteract this, we center girls and women. We need to tell those stories about the men. We need to show the images of them. But we also note that the problem is not trans-identified people. The problem is males. That's the difference. These are males in female spaces. We don't care how they identify. We don't care about all the modern terminology about non-binary and gender fluid and all of that. We are pro-women. So next slide, please. We lift up women's stories. For instance, here's the women's swimming team at Roanoke College. When they learned that a male was planning to join their team, they complained to the school, which did not support them. Taking matters into their own hands, they asked the male to step aside, and he did. Then they bravely held a press conference about the experience. Next slide, please. Here's fencer Stephanie Turner refusing to compete against a man. And then next slide, please. Here's Anna-Leigh Wilson, who's only 14 years old, giving a speech to an audience of 500. Anna-Leigh lost a junior Olympics race in Washington to a boy, then explained, "We have been told," she and her female teammates, "that it will be our fault if this transgender athlete takes their life." This is called emotional blackmail. We also tap into a cultural understanding that women's sports matter. As a result of our own advocacy, the public now supports women's sports. They get it. Schools and colleges in the US still drag their feet on Title IX. Men still, 53 years after the passage of that bill, receive more than $1 billion more in college scholarship money. But half of all girls now play sports. Therefore, half of all parents now commit time and money to support their athletic daughters. These parents are emotionally invested too, and they have a front row seat to what's fair and what's not. So finally, we talk about fairness. All sports are based on fairness. And if you cheat or lie, that's always grounds for disqualification or expulsion. We remind people performance-enhancing drugs are not fair. Bribing referees is not fair. Pretending to qualify for the Paralympics is not fair. And males in female sports, same principle, unfair. I mentioned that our success is linked to the overall women's rights movement. Sports is a domino that is beginning to topple the dangerous myth that boys can become girls and deserve girls' rights. Interestingly, trans activists understand this connection. Here's Julia Serrano, a trans-identified man, reporting to his trans fans, advising them not to concede on sports because of the domino effect. Next slide, please. So this says, characterizing trans girls, meaning boys, as boys in a sports context would lead one to characterize them as such in other contexts too. After all, if trans girls, in other words, boys, are really boys when they're playing sports, then they would also be considered boys in the bathroom and boys in medical offices, and thus denied access to female hormones. Exactly. This is how we are toppling the dangerous myth that men can become women and deserve women's rights. And now just for a brief list of what we have accomplished so far, you probably know about the US President's executive order called Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports. For Democrats, including myself, Trump is the strangest of all strange bedfellows and an unprecedented disgrace. But the woman who wrote that order, May Mailman, is on our team. That language is our language. And these orders are helping us succeed. For instance, when the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee announced in July, and this was a very big deal, that only females can compete in the female category in all US Olympic sports. They explained this was to, quote, ensure that women have a fair and safe competition environment consistent with the Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports executive order. And when the NCAA, which runs college sports rather, there's more sports than just basketball, when they decided to restrict the female category to females in college, they also cited that executive order. We would rather have sports leaders do the right thing without presidential pressure, but we will take the wins. Also, there are 27 US states, only the Republican ones, alas, but those 27 have passed laws restricting school female sports to females. There are at least 15 young women suing for their rights. Two of these cases are heading to the Supreme Court this fall, where we expect rulings in our favor. And I'm sure you're aware, as an international enlightened group, that the UK Supreme Court ruled that men cannot be legally considered women, even if they have gender recognition certificates. Personally, my favorite line of the For Women Scotland's argument was, quote, the defining characteristic of a lesbian is that she is not sexually attracted to male bodies, nor is she sexually attracted to certificates. So as a result, sports organizations throughout the UK are updating their policies to exclude men and thereby include women. There are 20 American and international sport governing bodies that have earned a gold rating from the Women's Sports Policy Working Group, my group, for implementing female-only policies for all females at all levels of competition. And that's 20, up from 0 just 5 years ago, when testosterone suppression or even self-ID, a simple I'm trans declaration, was sufficient. And finally, public opinion continues to shift in our favor. According to the New York Times, 79% of Americans now favor no males in women's sports, including 69% of Democrats. There is a lot more to do. We need the International Olympic Committee to step up and implement sex testing, as World Athletics has done. We need all sports organizations in all countries to come on board. We need a federal law here and abroad. We need to win at the Supreme Court here. We need to restore more than 600 records to their rightful owners, rather than the males who stole those records from women. But we have momentum on our side, along with a growing team. This is my final slide, Joe, so just do me a favor, show that. This is a drawing of mine after a famous Picasso painting. We do this work hold on just a sec, in service of scenes like this, 2 female athletes celebrating freedom, joy, and each other with no male interference. I'll close with a comment by my friend and colleague, Nancy Hogshead, 3-time Olympic gold medal swimmer, Title IX attorney, and lifelong women's sports advocate. How could they have imagined that female athletes would ever back down? I'd love to have you join our team. The best way to stay in touch with me is through strongerwomen.substack.com, where, as Joe mentioned, I have weekly posts on this topic and others related to strong women, especially older women athletes. So Joe, your call. We can take questions now or wait until after Jocelyn's presentation.
Great. Well, let's if there are any questions, we haven't got any in the Q&A yet, but let's put them in the chat now, because I can see the chat. Right, so we've got one already. Mariah, can you explain details of sex testing? That's a question.
Sure. This was done in the Olympics for a period of about 15 years, and all of the female, until about 1996. And all of the female athletes surveyed said they like it. It is called a cheek swab. Generally, it can be done via blood too, but it's completely non-invasive. So do not believe any sort of scare language you might hear about genital testing. Nobody is taking anybody's clothes off. They just stick a little Q-tip in your cheek, inside your cheek, and test your DNA. They are looking not just for XY versus XX chromosomes, they're looking specifically for something called the SRY gene. So I won't get any more technical than that, but it does screen out the males. And then if the Y is present, then they look to be sure that that particular male has access to his own androgens or testosterone, since in very rare cases, some differences of sexual development, people look pretty much like males with female genitals, but they have internal male organs, but they can't use their own androgens. So that's a very special case. But mostly it efficiently, effectively screens out the males, and women want it. So we need to reinstate it, and we are gradually doing that through the leadership of World Athletics.
So I can't see any other questions, but I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Right, one's not a question, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's that in my reading of the suffragette movement in the UK, they did all sorts of stuff, very, very good. It was fantastic, like
Yes, it was.
breaking windows and burning down buildings and uh, not eating.
Mm-hmm.
But the breaking point was when they started putting acid on golf course greens and attacking golf courses. And
Right. Hitting
Emmeline
them where it hurts.
Pankhurst says that nothing was happening, nothing was happening. And then it was fantastic because they started destroying the golf courses, and then loads and loads of really influential men would come and say, can you call your women off, Emmeline? And Emmeline said, they're not my women, they're doing what they want, but the way to get them to stop is to give us the vote. And I know it's more complicated than that, but I think your
Oh, no,
point that
it's a great example. Mm-hmm.
sports is a domino. It's actually, people think of it as just leisure, but it's actually crucial to men, but and well, to everyone, but men don't want to be threatened in it. And it was crucial for the suffragettes, Emmeline Pankhurst says, and it's clearly the thing we've won the most on, I think. It's the most
Yes,
obvious win.
yes, and just let me just add, speaking of British history, when the bicycle was invented, women, and it was upper class white women who had access to them, and it was that class of women who were being chaperoned, but it did give them the freedom to leave the chaperones in the dust and go ride throughout the countryside on their own. It led to the invention of bloomers, which are pants, much more comfortable, more practical, more safe, more private. So women were aware. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were both very aware about the bicycle leading the way to the suffrage, to the ballot boxes or something like that, they said.
Yeah. And then I've got a question. What should we be doing to what would you recommend that we do? Because like say where I am, our park run still, our 5K on Saturdays, they still let men identify as women. How can we change that?
Well, Mara Yamauchi, a name you may know, is leading that particular effort to report on Twitter daily or weekly, every time it happens, how many men are winning in the park run. She's shooting in the women's category. She's shooting down all of the arguments about how it's just for fun. It doesn't matter because the results are reported. So you might check in with her or at least follow her on Twitter. It's Mara, M-A-R-A, Yamauchi, Y-A-M-A-U-C-H-I, another good former elite runner who is now very active in this women's sports movement. Overall, I do recommend you not only follow my Substack, but you can easily get from mine to the Women's Sports Policy Substack, which we do through the Women's Sports Policy Working Group. And there we do have calls for action periodically. So to keep up with petitions that are being signed, or in the case of Americans, representatives we want to reach with our message, that's a good way to keep up. You can
Great.
also donate to either group. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so there's a question as well, and you might not know the answer to that. Who got Billie Jean King? I guess it's saying who persuaded her, or is she pro-trans?
She is so
Yeah.
far. We are working on her, Martina Navratilova, who is in our Women's Sports Policy Working Group. has specifically reached out to her. Of course, they know each other well. That has not been successful yet. My personal theory about this that goes beyond Billie Jean is that the women in my life, and I think it's a pattern beyond my own life, who are very immersed in the LGB movement initially, and then stayed there when they added the T and beyond, who are gay identified more than feminist identified, those women are most likely to defend men in women's spaces. And I've been canceled. I've lost good friends over this. I'm getting hate mail from former friends who I haven't talked to in 45 years. They're just furious at me. And that's who they are. They are in that group. And I have never stayed in that group. I've been openly gay since 1975, proudly. 50 years celebration going on right now in my own little head. But I'm a feminist first. My allegiance is to women. And of course, I mean actual women and girls. And specifically in the sports world, that's where I have put my feminist energy, is to the empowerment of women and girls through sports.
Yeah,
So if
brilliant.
those, yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think let's move on to our next speaker, who is Jocelyn Crawley, and then we'll get you back on at the end. So thank you so much
Sure.
for that talk, Mariah, and we will move on. Thank you now to Jocelyn. So welcome, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for coming on to speak to us. So Jocelyn Crawley is a radical feminist thinker who resides in Atlanta, Georgia. She enjoys thinking, talking, reading, and writing about strategies for resistance that women and girls can utilize to create worlds marked by subjectivity and self-actualization. Above all, she believes that the most radical act a woman can engage in is reading radical literature. So that's fantastic. We agree with that. So welcome, Jocelyn. And your talk is the Brock Turner Chanel Miller case. And if you get started, I'll get the video, the slides up. But if it's okay if you just get started, because it will take me a second to get the first slide. Great.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having me, Joe Brew. It's awesome to be here. So the title of this presentation is Discursive Formations in the Creation and Perpetuation of Rape Cultures Following Brock Turner's Rape of Chanel Miller. And so the presentation is rooted in an article that is going to be a blog post on the absolutely amazing Wolf blog, the Women's Liberation Front, that Leah, Keith, and I have been discussing for a bit of time now. And the emphasis of the presentation is on Brock Turner and the rape of Chanel Miller and discourse surrounding it. But I want to give you some background to contextualize what I want to talk about. So this presentation involves a review of the language, ideas, and concepts that are utilized within rape cultures and how these aspects of communication between people in communities creates the conditions confluent with the perpetuation of rape cultures. The rape case I utilize to explore this concept is a Brock Turner versus Chanel Miller case. And to contextualize my argument that rape cultures are grounded in specific modes of speech and information exchange, I review the variegated yet highly similar conversations and communications that transpired amongst and between individuals who either insisted that Brock Miller did not rape Chanel Miller, or that if some form of indiscretion was present, it was not actually sexual assault. In making my argument, I utilize Foucault's concept of discursive formation to provide readers with a context in which to understand how language can and does operate within communities. So, what is a discursive formation? In his work, Foucault, a French historian of ideas and philosopher who was also an author, literary critic, political activist, and teacher, defines discursive formations as the system of beliefs, practices, and rules which determine how a particular concept or subject is discussed and understood within a unique social milieu. So to break that down, the idea is that in specific communities, in this case, communities that tolerate rape cultures, there are specific words, phrases, and concepts that circulate to define and determine what is being talked about, okay? And so what is a rape culture? A rape culture is a society or environment which maintains attitudes, beliefs, and ideologies which trivialize or normalize sexual assault and abuse. Some examples of beliefs and value systems that normalize violence would be objectification, hypermasculinity, heteronormativity, strict conformance to gender roles and rules, rape myths, and victim blaming. All right, so in my article that's being turned into a blog post, the American philosopher Linda Alcoff has specific things to say about discursive formations and their relationship to rape culture. And she says, rape cultures produce a discursive formation in which the intelligibility of claims is organized not by logical argument or evidence, but by frames that set out who can be victimized, who can be accused, which are plausible narratives, and in what context rape may be spoken about, even in private spaces. They don't tell us what is true. They tell us what can be true as opposed to nonsensical. Now, what does Alcoff's assessment mean for us? Alcoff is essentially stating that within a rape culture, discourse regarding whether an individual was actually raped is not rooted in logic or the presentation of evidence. Rather, the discourse within rape cultures involves discussion regarding whether the ostensible victim is credible, whether certain types of people can actually be raped, whether certain types of people can be accused, which narratives regarding rape make sense, and which spaces are appropriate for discourse about sexual assault, meaning that essentially within rape cultures, there's an attempt to control the conversation regarding what can be thought about and what can be said about in terms of women, girls, what rape is and how it should be evaluated. All right, so in thinking about Linda Alcoff's assertion regarding the connection between discursive formations and rape culture, I decided that I agreed and that there are three specific types of arguments or ideas that circulate within communities that tolerate and perpetuate rape cultures. And I want to discuss them and examine them in context of the Brock Turner rape case. So the three things that I argue that happen and that take place in terms of language within cultures and communities that promote rape culture are these. One, they contextualize human character in ways that obscure logical analysis and are work to delegitimize the notion that rape warrants legal punishment. In other words, rather than focusing on the reality that a person has been raped, emphasis is placed on the good character of the rapist or the quote unquote bad character of the victim. That's number one. Two, they redirect attention away from the reality of rape and into other less problematic and disturbing ways to think about what can and does transpire between men and women. And three, they produce environments in which, even when the reality of rape is acknowledged, it is minimized or subjected to ambiguation. All right, so getting into the Brock Turner and Chanel Miller, I think many of us are familiar with this case, but I'll give a brief overview in case some of us are not. So the case involves former Stanford swimmer Brock Turner, who was convicted of sexual assault in 2016 after attacking an unconscious Chanel Miller. Miller's victim impact statement during Turner's sentencing went viral, leading to public outcry over the lenient sentence of 6 months in county jail. The judge, Erin Persky, was recalled by voters in 2018. Miller later revealed her identity and published her memoir, Know My Name, which addressed the failings of the justice system and campus culture in handling sexual assault cases. So coming back to discursive formation, issue number one, which is how within rape cultures, individuals create discourse that downplays what has actually happened to the victim and rather places primacy on the character of the rapist. So how did this happen? How did this actually happen in the Brock Turner rape case? In the case of Brock Turner, the process of creating discourse regarding the good character or nature of the rapist worked to obscure conversations regarding whether and to what extent legal and or social punishment should be exacted against the violator. For example, in contextualizing discourse regarding whether and to what extent Brock Turner should be punished under the law, Judge Erin Persky asserted, obviously, the prison sentence would have a severe impact on him. The defendant is youthful and has no significant record of prior criminal offenses. So in Judge Erin Persky's assertion, the primacy is not placed upon whether the sentence should be consonant with the reality of him having raped Chanel Miller, for which there was extensive evidence, but rather for the reality that he's young and that he doesn't have a record of prior criminal offenses. In other words, alluding to the reality that his character, having not committed a plethora of crimes, means that his sentence shouldn't be significant. Okay? Discursive formation number two. Within these rape cultures, as I was stating earlier, attention is directed away from the reality of the rape that happened and into other less problematic and disturbing ways to think about what can and does transpire between men and women. Now, how did this happen? Discursive formation number 2 transpires when Brock Turner's friend, Leslie Rasmussen, wrote a letter in his defense. And I'm going to give you an excerpt from the letter that she wrote in defense of her friend, Brock Turner. I don't think it's fair to base the fate of the next 10 plus years of his life on the decision of a girl who doesn't remember anything but the amount she drank to press charges against him. And I hope you notice that discursive formation number 1 is present in her speech as well, when she talks about or alludes to the fact that Chanel Miller was drinking. And that's another aspect of talking about the good character of the rapist and the quote unquote bad character of the victim. Okay, moving forward. I'm not blaming her directly for this, Rasmussen says, because that isn't right. But where do we draw the line and stop worrying about being politically correct every second of the day and see that rape on campuses isn't always because people are rapists? It is because these universities market themselves as the biggest party schools in the country. They encourage drinking. I think it is disgusting, and I am so sick of hearing that these young men are monsters when really you are throwing barely 20-somethings into these camp-like university environments, supporting partying, and then your mind is blown when things get out of hand. This is completely different from a woman getting kidnapped and raped as she is walking to her car in a parking lot. That is a rapist. These are not rapists. These are idiot boys and girls having too much to drink and not being aware of their surroundings and having clouded judgment. Okay, now how does this conform to discursive formation number 2, this issue of directing attention away from the reality that a rape happened and into less problematic and disturbing ways to think about what happens between men and women? So I argue in my article, turning into a blog post, Rasmussen's letter conforms to the second aspect of the discursive formation because her verbiage reconfigures sexual interaction between men and women so that it appears less problematic and disturbing than it actually is, as made manifest by the ongoingness of rape. In Rasmussen's letter, she asserts that what transpires between men and women in sexual interactions is actually not rape, but rather it's a less desirable form of sex which transpires in context of drinking and partying that leads to a form of only ambiguously, amorphously understood sex, which she refers to as things like getting out of hand, not rape. This is the way that individuals who operate within discursive formations and rape culture communicate about sexual assault. It is not, they frequently think and assert, that sexual assault is necessarily happening. It is rather, they argue, that something less problematic, like consensual sex that transpires against the background of drinking and partying. Okay. And discursive formation number 3, I argue that within rape cultures, people produce arguments that involve stating that if rape is acknowledged as a reality, it's also minimized or subjected to ambiguation. So Rasmussen is not the only individual who perpetuates rape culture through the minimization of rape or ambiguation of events which individuals are attempting to clearly define as rape. In a letter that he wrote to Judge Persky regarding his son, Brock Turner, Dan A. Turner asserts, these verdicts have broken and shattered him and our family in so many ways. His life will never be the one that he dreamed about and worked so hard to achieve. That is a steep price to pay for 20 minutes of action out of his 20 plus years of life. In referring to Chanel Miller's rape as 20 minutes of action, Turner minimizes the dehumanization that transpires when an individual is raped, as well as the ongoing dissociation and dissonance that sexual assault engenders. Turner's misapprehension of temporality is unveiled when he thinks of sexual action as lasting just 20 minutes. In reality, individuals who endure unwanted sexual interactions frequently report that the trauma results in long-standing pain. This pain can be intermittent, coming and going in seemingly aleatory ways. It can also be perpetual and systematic, reflecting a seemingly inexplicable rhythm whose consistent constancy results in psychosomatic unraveling. In other words, to say that rape is essentially 20 minutes of action is minimizing the reality that it has long-standing impacts, both psychologically, emotionally on the victim. So How the discursive formations of rape culture ruin everything, as patriarchy always and only can. When considered in terms of its constituent elements and how those individual components operate to create one cohesive entity, the role that discursive formation outlined above can play in impacting responses and receptivity to the reality of rape is plain, I argue. Rather than facilitating awareness and understanding regarding what sexual assault is and how it impacts individuals, the discursive formations which surface within rape cultures support and sustain immersion in a world of illogic regarding the existence, nature, scope, and impact of sexual assault. These discourses perpetuate a key aspect of patriarchy, false consciousness, through a plethora of language processes which invert reality or subject it to the confusion which results from attaining an only ambiguous understanding of what actually happens. This fragmented and false understanding of reality precludes individuals from thinking accurately and responding appropriately to sexual assaults as they transpire. And one could argue that the breathtakingly lenient sentence of Brock Turner attests to the way that these discursive formations, which one might construe as just or only the words that people use to think about rape, negatively alter material reality. Now, progressive discursive formations, or as is referred to in many academic communities, counter narratives. Despite the persistence of discursive formations that promote and perpetuate rape culture, whether intentionally or unwittingly, progressive discourses which involve speaking truth to power and unequivocally, abashedly condemning rape exist and gain traction amongst individuals who are ideologically aligned to radical politics. As Turner's rape of Chanel Miller became the topic of discourse in progressive, empathic communities, new discourses, including the holding up of signs saying Stanford protects rapists, surfaced and caused many to be reminded that there are still individuals and communities who are willing to speak truth to power, both the power that individual men hold to rape women and the power that institutions like Stanford hold to protect the individual men who rape women. Relevance. What does this have to do with anything in 2025? As radical feminism and other feminists persist in the face of global patriarchy and male supremacy, the reality of rape is integral to the process of men ruling the planet must remain integral to our discourse. This is the case because rape persists at alarming rates, and despite the development and proliferation of discourses insisting that women have made progress, individuals who have studied the reality of sexual assault continue to report that little has changed. In reading through sections of a recent article on this issue, I noted that one legal expert reported that one of the problems we are still experiencing is that many rapists do not fear the law. Additionally, the law regarding rape is not consistently applied. And recognizing the longstanding impact that rape has on women and girls, it is important for radical feminists not to lose sight of sexual assault as integral to our discourse as other important issues, including how we want to respond to transgenderism, surface. So summing it all up, because entire communities are exposed to and even inundated in the logic or illogic of discursive formations regarding rape culture, it is important for radical feminists to engage in the ongoing process of disambiguation by regularly outlining and unpacking the fictive, fragmented, and or fallacious reasoning that individuals and communities oftentimes utilize to create worlds in which rapists receive little to no punishment for dramatically and negatively impacting the lives of victims. Their readers have the opportunity to reconfigure rapes such that there is assent to both the fact that they are actually happening and that something significant should be done about them. All right, thank you, women.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. I'm going to bring in add spotlights, Mariah as well. What has thank you so much for that talk. And what has happened is I haven't seen that there are any questions, but there's a lot of discussion in the chat of people saying this is, like, well, quite a few people were saying that Foucault was a paedophile, so that's a sort of bad thing about him. Yeah, go on.
Yes. And I understand that argument. As an academic, my view is that an individual can produce an idea that is meaningful and relevant and that can be incorporated into our discourse, irrespective of whether we want to consider him or her to be a bad person or to have committed egregious acts. And I just want to say that I am adamantly and avidly against pedophilia. But
Yeah.
I think that this idea is very important.
Yeah. And then the ideas of how the rapist gets away because of these constructed discourses are
Yeah.
really, really interesting. And because it sort of sometimes it just seems unbelievable that they can be let off with, was it 6 months that he
Yeah.
got,
Yes.
Roxana? It's just
Yes.
horrific, isn't it?
Yes. And also another thing that I thought about as I was reviewing and preparing over the last 24 hours, and I had almost forgotten, was there were two eyewitnesses who saw what was happening. So if the argument was about what actually happened, there were eyewitnesses, but yet the illogic of the community continues to persist, and the words and the phrases or detract from the reality of what actually happened and keep going back into other realms when the legal system is here specifically to convict criminals based on evidence. And so
Yeah.
the arguments, the fantastical nature of it all is that what actually happened doesn't appear to matter.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Mariah? Did you get have you got any questions or any points about that?
No, I was just starting to read the discussion in the chat because I couldn't do that when I was speaking, and I didn't want to do it when
Yeah.
Jocelyn was speaking. But thank you for all these good, supportive questions and comments that I'm seeing there. There is a lot of disappointment about Megan Rapinoe and Billie Jean King. I have to live in an optimistic sort of place in order to do this work, and my whole life. And I do believe they will come around. So that's the caveat, is I tend to be an optimist, but I do think they'll come around because that is the trend.
Yeah.
That's the way it's going. Charles Barkley has made positive comments. Even Gavin Newsom made an attempt in that direction and got slammed. So did two Democratic congressmen, and then retreated. It's scary for people to speak up, but Megan herself has competed and lost to junior high boys in soccer. So she knows males have a tremendous advantage. And I think if we can continue to speak out, those of us who are willing, I'll add that too, just that you were asking what can people do. I think one-on-one conversation is largely how we won gay rights, because those of us who are gay came out and our friends and family figured out, oh yeah, they're really just talking about love and freedom, and sure, why not? And I think we need to use words like male and men, and continue talking to our friends and family and writing letters and all of those things.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And then I've just looked in the chat that there's a link from Leah Keith saying, Jocelyn Crawley, your articles are in Women's Liberation Front.org, Writings from Wolf Rad Femmes, and there are lots of really good pieces by you. So I think if people could if you want to have a look at them women, so it's a post about, I don't know, it's sort of about 10 from the top. So you could then get a bit more of your writing. Um, and what Jocelyn, before we were talking, you were saying about how you transitioned from being a feminist to a radical feminist. It was really interesting. Could you tell the women on the webinar about that?
Yeah, definitely. So it happened when I was completing my master's degree at Southern New Hampshire University, and I chose as my master's thesis a book by Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale. And I had always kind of I had feminist leanings. I was like, yeah, women's rights. I'm a child of a single parent. I was always taught to put my education first, and all these types of things. And I'd done my undergraduate thesis on a comparison contrast of three Shakespearean texts, which was about the constriction and confinement of women. And so I felt like I understood how the world really worked and women's rights and everything. But then when I did my master's thesis on The Handmaid's Tale, and I was placing primacy on sexual assault and false consciousness, and I did this deep research and study regarding the reality of sexual abuse of women, and I realized how widespread it was, and I wasn't thinking about it ambiguously, and had the concrete concepts of radical feminists, like porn is the theory, rape is the practice. I'm recognizing that a lot of women who are in porn are there because they've been roped in it or because they were trafficked first, and that it's not this liberating experience that women have. And then also seeing the holes in the arguments for liberal feminism, being that our freedom is going to be the ability to be as lascivious and sexually free as men are, or to create MTV videos in which we're displaying our bodies because it's now our choice. And the arguments just began to fall apart as I saw over and over again the minimization of discourse regarding the proliferation and the widespread nature of things like rape, the reality of women who spoke about these realities being silenced, and the reality of so-called feminists who promote the idea that sex is liberation being given more attention and more talk time for men, and recognizing that that's actually a part of male supremacy, and that there are a plethora of pseudo-feminisms that exist, and then realizing I'm continually getting misinformation about what is going on with women. And there was so much suppressed literature that I had never heard. Andrea Dworkin, Catherine McKinnon, et cetera. And also the debates and divisions within now, and how many years ago, when a radical feminist would try to join and speak about lesbianism as a viable alternative to normative heterosexuality, or just want to be included and to recognize how lesbianism is a part of this political process, women who were supposedly for women and now would shut them up too. There were just so many things, and I thought the mainstream version of what women's rights that I have been receiving all of this time is not accurate, because within it there's this attempt to promote heteronormativity, and that the solution is just for men and women to be together. There are just a few problems that we need to work on. But when I kept looking at the evidence and how prevalent rape is, and how women who don't tote the line of we just need to stand and join hands with men just kept getting silenced and pushed away, that's when I realized radical feminism actually has the correct analysis
Yes.
of what is going on. And so I need to ideologically align myself with reality. And of course, there is dissent. I understand the argument regarding Foucault. I personally do believe that meaningful ideas can be produced from a plethora of sources, and as rational individuals, we can sit down and discuss them logically. And so
Yeah.
that's my view. And I understand that will upset some radical feminists. You know, when Lear and I were talking, she's one of the women whose amazing article, "The Girls in the Grasses," transitioned me from liberal feminism to radical feminism. I said, when I joined the amazing organization Wolf, that I understand that there will be dissent and there will be disagreement, but I do profoundly believe in individual subjectivity, and that we have the ability to think independently and abstractly, and yet still join together and ideologically align ourselves for strategies of resistance, even if we disagree.
Yeah, well,
About
I mean,
specific
tomorrow
ideas.
we've got this radical feminist perspectives talk that I'm going to be doing with Marion Rotiliano, and it's about the book Mary Daly, and she, not in this book, we're going to do Beyond God the Father, but in other books she says that she does sometimes quote and use references from men, and she sees herself as a pirate stealing back our ideas, or she says that quite often those ideas had been given to the man by a woman anyway, but she says it's a form of piracy. So that's what she moved to using fewer and fewer and fewer male references during her life, but she did, the beginning she used so many, it's just but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I was reading another book that transitioned me from liberal feminism to radical feminism. It was by the amazing Atkinson, and it was Amazon Odysseys. And she talks about in that book, and I was very inspired by, there was a point in her life where she wouldn't even talk to men. And she put in the book, something along the lines of, if you even think about men and take your mind away from placing primacy on women and the female condition, you're going down the wrong path. And that's when I really started to fall in love with radical feminism. And I was like, right, I've never even really had this conversation with myself about how placing primacy on men, and, for example, not wanting to talk about rape or not wanting to talk about being a lesbian because it can offend men, has shut so many women up and silenced the work that we are trying to do. And I was like, actually, she's right. And I don't have a problem with that. If a woman doesn't want to talk to a man, if a woman doesn't want to mention work, by men in her own work, even if those men say that they're feminists, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I remember when I worked with Deep Green Resistance, I had this internal monologue because I am a big fan of Derek Jensen, but I had this conversation in my head. Well, Derek is a male. And I thought to myself, however, Derek is also a radical feminist, and he actually has done a lot more work to challenge and resist male supremacy than a lot of women who are complacent with the male supremacist regime. So that's a reality too.
Yeah, and it's complicated because there are quite a few. Go on. There are quite a few males who are quite helpful at the moment in this our struggle against the gender identity ideology. Maria, go on.
Just yeah, if I may. Well, yeah, it has really been hard for us in this women's sports movement to counter one of the emotional manipulations that happens regarding these poor boys, these poor trans boys, the 16-year-old who, you know, always knew he was a girl because he liked pink. You've heard all of that, but that's what gets deposited, that perspective, that male perspective, that protective of boys and men perspective gets deposited into our conversations, into our articles. People are always trying to draw us away from talking about women and women's rights and over to pitying men, taking care of men, minimizing the impact they're having on us. So that's why, you know, we do our best to center women while also telling the story and showing the images of just how invasive and intrusive and oppressive these boys and men are in our spaces.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I
And
recommend that in
yes.
your own conversations. Don't let them get you off track talking about, well, this boy might kill himself or something. It's
Oh God,
emotional blackmail. Yeah.
And Jocelyn, there's a question for you here from Carol. It's in the Q&A. It says, Jocelyn, what's your thoughts on the coverage of rape gangs in the UK over the last 25 years? I don't know if you've followed that about these the rape gangs.
No, I haven't. And I do have an article on the amazing WLRN's site, and it is a review of the amazing book Fraternity Gang Rape. So I'm adamantly against it. I think that should be an integral part of our discourse, but because I haven't been following the coverage of what's going on in UK, I just want to refrain from speaking about that.
Yeah,
But but I will say, if it's coverage coming from the mainstream, it's probably inaccurate, and it's probably not as hard as it should be on the atrocity that is rape. And we probably need to read more radical interpretations of the situation.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good instinct. Right, well, look, I think that we could play the video from Pliers. Unfortunately, she's not here. But we could either do that or we can play. We've got a news update from Kerry Bruce from the States. But maybe we should just go ahead and do the Pliers thing because that's what we said we would do. So, but before doing that, Mariah, have you got anything else you'd like to add?
Not at the moment, thanks. I look forward to the video, and people have asked me to stay afterward, and you have invited me to do that, so I will do that.
Great, so that's brilliant. So you'll be able to go to the breakout rooms. And Jocelyn, that's the same. We'll play this video and then we'll open up these breakout rooms. It's a different link, so we'll put it in the chat so everyone you could see in the chat, and everybody going knows they need to put their video on. So there'll be a discussion room, and if you can go, Jocelyn, that'd be great. But if you can't, then no worries.
Definitely wouldn't miss it for the world.
Okay, brilliant. Right, well, I'm going to now share the video. Now, the only thing is, when I played the beginning video, the sound didn't work. So let's hope this sound is going to actually work this time. So let's do share sound and aim to see if it's going to work. We'll give it a go. Right. Oh, I just want to say as an introduction, this was made by Pliers. She is a Black radical feminist lesbian theorist based in New York City. She's published this book, which is Black Women and Trans Ideology. It's a searing radical feminist critique of trans ideology, how it exploits historical suffering, cultural power, and political loyalty of Black women. It's just really amazing book. And in fact, the video is brilliant. There's some clips of sort of to set the scene of the situation we're in, but this video doesn't do justice at all to how good the book is. So I would recommend, I'll put the link up for the book do buy it. It's just an amazing book. Okay, let's try to play this then. Okay, so hopefully, oh, sorry, I'm just going to go back. I'm sorry about this. Just double check that I have actually shared the sound. Yeah, I have. Okay, it should work. Let's go for it. And let me know in the chat if it works or not.
If you're dark skinned, you gotta chill with the transphobia. Yeah. Because you're first in line. Big women. If you with the transphobia and you're a bigger woman, you're also going to be subject to it. You gotta stop. You gotta chill. It's gonna hurt all of us. It's gonna swing on your ass too. And I'm a big bitch too. That's why I was like, I have been called a man many times. Yes, many times before this too. I've been called. I've been accused. It's all of that. That's why I said all of our oppression is tied together. It's all tied together. So it's very upsetting to me when women of color are TERFs too.
Please, dear, keep smiling and scatter the flowers.
I ought to be scattering some teeth. I should have been. Please, Prince. Don't you touch me. You don't know me that well. Who do you think you are anyway?
I'm Prince Charming. I'm a member of her royal family.
If you're a member of her family, you should be wearing a bandit's outfit. Because y'all robbed me, honey.
It's making my lips so hard and crispy. Ooh, would you like some?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Did you take Lamar's?
No, but I was with Lamar and Lamert and them. I don't know Lamar. Ain't he light-skinned and stuff? And he used to pop lock and stuff back in the day. I remember him. He's good. He said, I'll rock his word. I said, well, I'm so scared. Why you be scared?
I can't help it. I'm 2 weeks overdue.
Oh, girl, that ain't nothing. I'm about 2 months overdue. I just crossed my legs and held it in because I wanted me a Capricorn. Ooh, boy, I feel like this baby is kicking field goals in my stuff. I guess I should have drank all that Kool-Aid.
Oh, my God. Your water broke, doctor.
Yes, nurse. What seems to be the problem? What the hell? Get her to the burn unit immediately.
She is about to give birth, doctor.
She looks like a damn moose chewing ice.
Time to play games with you, okay?
Hey, Bubba, ain't nobody playing no games, all right? Ain't nobody playing no games, all right? All I want to know is why Martin had a party and didn't invite me. I mean, I like the party, all right? Did I like the party, all right? Did I like the
party? Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
It's just me. I'm good. I'm good. I'm coming. I'm good. Trust me, I'm good. Go ahead.
purpose of this presentation is to provide a critical entry point into the arguments I develop more fully in my book. Because the discourse around trans ideology so often misrepresents or erases the histories of Black women, I will begin with a short historical overview. This overview is not intended to be exhaustive. Rather, it highlights the ways in which trans-identified males position themselves as experts on Black women's experiences and how such claims function to distort historical knowledge and reframe it for male advantage. My aim here is to establish a framework that underscores the indispensability of women's histories across races while demonstrating why historical literacy is essential to resisting the false narratives advanced by fetishistic men. Since this discussion centers on Black women and trans ideology, it is necessary to examine the more recent claims emerging from the trans community concerning women, and Black women in particular. In recent years, we have seen both Black and white trans-identified males lean heavily on their selective knowledge of the historical suffering of Black women. This knowledge is not employed in solidarity, but rather as a weapon deployed against white women who they claim were responsible for the plight of Black women and used to rewrite history in ways that recast themselves at its center. Once recast, it also allows him to point the finger at others, specifically white women, who he deems responsible for the historical suffering of Black women. It is crucial to note that this continual reliance on the histories of Black women has little to do with genuine respect for them. Rather, his constant invocation of her struggle operates in four distinct ways. First, these men know very well that the Black woman sits in a singular place of betrayal. Not only has her own community abandoned her, she is left without broad support, which makes her uniquely vulnerable. His pandering to her is effective precisely because it is transactional. In exchange for his feigned respect, he secures an enforcer whom he then deploys to check, discipline, and silence other women into compliance on his behalf. Second, it grants him the appearance of historical authority before an audience he knows is largely indifferent to Black women and their history. Third, it allows him to weaponize references to Black women suffering against white women who refuse to accept his claim of what he believes is womanhood. And fourth, it enables him to hijack the framework of intersectionality for himself, using it as a tool to coerce and bully women into recognizing him as what he believes is female. In the sections that follow, we will break these 4 points apart and examine each in turn, using history as our template and evidence. So because I am so excited about this opportunity, I went ahead and made a timeline for all of the women watching this presentation right now. And if you look at your screen, you can see here on the left-hand side, we have what I call the era of enslavement and political exclusion, 1600s to the 1960s, where we have the solidification of the Black female, her presence, and her sex. This is very important because when you hear men like T.S. Madison and Hope Giselle claim that Black women were never seen as women, these are lies. Black women were always seen as women, and this is evident in how she was brutalized by both Black and white men. Masculinization was a tactic to justify brutality, not a belief. Today, Black and white trans-identified men repeat the same strategy to excuse their treatment of Black women today. During this time period, Black women were exploited as laborers, breeders, and commodities under slavery. White men used law and violence to control every aspect of Black women's reproductive and economic life. Black man did not do the same because he was not owner of the Black female body as the white male was previously. But when slavery ended, he became owner through brutality and employed her body to the selling of sex to other Black men and white men alike. After emancipation, Black men gained political rights, 15th Amendment, 1870, before Black women. Next, we will move over to the era of legal erasure, 1976, where De Graffenried versus General Motors happened, and Black women sued them for discrimination. The case was dismissed, reasoning GM hired white women and Black men, and this era is very important because it exposed how law erased Black women by forcing them into race-only or sex-only categories. After this, we have Crenshaw's work in 1989, where she captured the unique oppression of Black women. Her concept highlighted how Black women were erased when race and sex were considered separately. This was created to explain Black women's lived realities. not to justify male inclusion in women's spaces as the trans community would like for you to believe today. Then we have the era of caricature, 1970s to the 1990s, where we have Flip Wilson, Jamie Foxx, and Martin Lawrence, who presented Black women as grotesque, loud, and hypersexual for laughs. This era normalized the mockery of Black women as a form of entertainment and set the cultural stage for future appropriation of Black womanhood by trans-identified males. It also established woman-face as acceptable parody. And lastly, we have the era of hijacking, 2000s to the present, where trans-identified males appropriated intersectionality and Black women's history. Male pandering is strategy, exploiting Black women's history to discipline all women. The robbery of Black women's history and struggle goes unnoticed precisely because Black women are only considered valuable enough to steal from when it serves a purpose for the trans-identified male. Black and white men alike do not care about the plight of Black womanhood. Their only interest is in using it as a silencing tool against women who are not Black and who dare to question them, especially when they are operating within the framework of their fetish. The persistent masculinization of Black women, as introduced at the outset of this presentation, derives from the ways men treat women they deem undesirable. Within popular culture, Black men have long established darker skin and larger bodied Black women as undesirable, a judgment that translates into the rhetorical move of labeling them men. This maneuver is not accidental. Many of these same men whose desires are shaped by fetishistic attraction to other men weaponize the charge of masculinity against Black women precisely because it wounds, simultaneously discrediting their womanhood and reinforcing their marginalization. When men deem women, particularly Black women, unworthy of conventional desirability, they recast them in masculinized terms, thereby legitimizing their disdain for them. In this context, T.S. Madison's claim that transphobia affects dark-skinned women functions less as an acknowledgement of their lived experiences and more as a projection of his own biases. Implicit in his argument is the notion that darker-skinned and larger-bodied women occupy a position of inherent undesirability. Thus, they should accept his claim to what he believes is womanhood because, in his view, no one else would value their perspectives on sex. In effect, his assertion centers male authority by reinforcing the idea that men ultimately determine the parameters of desirability and, by extension, the legitimacy of women's voices. The only voice he permits her as a Black woman is one that silences other women into compliance. A stark example unfolded at San Francisco State University on April 6, 2023, when Riley Gaines, a white female athlete, spoke about being compelled to compete against a trans-identified male, William Thomas. During her visit, she was not only met with hostility from the student body, but also verbally attacked by other women, particularly Black women, who called her a bitch and publicly aligned themselves with a group of men who have historically contributed nothing to the struggle of Black womanhood in America except to appropriate it. This alignment underscores the way in which Black women's voices are conscripted into service of the trans agenda, even in the absence of trans-identified males themselves. The rhetorical move to delegitimize Gaines while defending Thomas illustrates how Black women's social position, already framed through masculinization and marginalization, is exploited as a tool to enforce compliance and erase dissent. The performance of authority, the stage historian. One of the most persistent features of American popular culture has been the negative caricature of Black women. From the 1970s portrayals such as Flip Wilson's Geraldine to Jamie Foxx's Wanda on In Living Color, the Black female aesthetic has been repeatedly exploited by men for comedic and commercial gain. These performances do more than entertain. They dehumanize the Black female body and her person. They prime audiences to see Black women as grotesque, disposable figures rather than as human beings deserving of empathy or defense. Thus, when Black women suffer, society has already been conditioned to dismiss their pain as something other than real or urgent. In this context, the audacity of trans-identified males, particularly Black trans-identified males, claiming authority over Black womanhood is staggering. They now speak on the historical mistreatment of Black women as though they have been its stewards all along. Yet prior to their insistence on being recognized as what they believe is a woman, they did not remind anyone of Black women's plight. Their invocation of her suffering is a recent, strategic move, adopted only once they found themselves at their manufactured margins and in need of centering. The mechanism for this centering is clear. Lean upon the history of the Black woman, appropriate her suffering, and repurpose it as proof of their own legitimacy. It is important to recognize that his earlier portrayals and references to Black women had nothing to do with reverence or solidarity, and certainly not with any authentic engagement with her struggle. Instead, they were bound up in exploitation, caricature, and mockery. His present performance, framing himself as tethered to her history, represents not respect but the exercising of his fetish, rebranded as a civil right. This is not unique to Black trans-identified males. White trans-identified males and gay men have engaged in the same appropriation, but the dynamics differ in telling ways.
Take a picture, bitch. Kissy face. Ha! Shut the fuck up. Pull up, stupid bitch. Why you lurking on my page, bitch? Why? I need answers. Like my pictures, bitch. Why you hating? Why? Because I'm cute, I'm pretty, I got a deep cup titty. Period. You talk about, hello, 911, she's spying on me. Leave me alone. Fuck off my page, bitch. Girl, I need you to come get me right now. No, for real, right now. Please. No, it's the longest looking for me. Bitch, I was stealing the Dillards. Yes, bitch. And that big ass security guard said, drop it. I said, drop what? No, bitch, I took off. Bitch, you gotta come now. No, bitch, I took off. I ran. I said, no, because I can't take a mugshot right now. I need to lose like 2 pounds. Come get me, bitch. No, we gonna get a smoothie. Bitch, strawberry kiwi. Hurry!
For the white man, the project has always been to normalize his fetish, to situate it within the language of civil rights so that others are compelled to recognize and even participate in it. For the Black man, the invocation of Black womanhood operates differently. It becomes a vehicle for distancing himself from the stigma and burden of Black masculinity within the United States, while attempting to claim a new form of respectability. In both cases, however, the function is the same. The Black woman's history is seized upon as a legitimizing device. Both men despise women, but both understand that their projects cannot reach the heartstrings of women without invoking the suffering of Black women. Her pain becomes the justification, the moral currency for their fetish and for their escape from accountability, whether from patriarchy broadly or from the specific realities of Black male life in America. Weaponizing Black women's history against white women, as I note in my book, one of the central fears of patriarchy has always been the potential unity of women across racial lines. Patriarchal power depends on division, and men have consistently exploited racial differences, imposed religious compliance without offering women or children any benefit, and manipulated cultural distinctions in order to weaken the natural bonds that arise from their shared sex. Both Black and white women, in their attempts to establish themselves in a society that discriminated against them because they were women, were compelled to perform race loyalty rather than cultivate solidarity with one another. This performance of loyalty forced women into antagonisms that worked against their natural gravitation toward one another, a gravitation rooted in their sexed experience, the capacity to bleed, to give birth, to breastfeed, and to sustain life. Men understood that they had the power to manipulate these divisions, and they institutionalized them through laws and customs. When today's trans-identified male refers to the mistreatment of Black women by white women throughout history, he rarely, if ever, acknowledges that such divisions were not initiated by women themselves, but were constructed and enforced by men. It was men who passed and enforced the laws that separated women along racial lines, men who created the structures that pitted women against one another for survival. Patriarchy thrived on these divisions because isolation left women vulnerable to exploitation by men of all races. Historically, this was visible first in the access white men granted themselves to the bodies of Black women during and after slavery. Black women were legally and socially available to them for sexual violence, forced reproduction, and economic exploitation. Later, once interracial marriage became legal in the United States in 1967 through the Supreme Court decision Loving versus Virginia, Black men too gained access to white women. This new proximity allowed for a new set of dynamics. On one hand, interracial marriage destabilized the rigid boundaries white patriarchy had enforced. On the other, it provided Black men with opportunities to weaponize their relationships with white women against Black women, portraying themselves as newly desirable and socially elevated. In both cases, male power was the constant. White men exploited the bodies of Black women, while Black men, once permitted legal access to white women, often leveraged that access to reposition themselves socially, sometimes at the expense of Black women. Meanwhile, white women themselves were subjected to patriarchal control and violence, but their suffering was obscured by the narrative that cast them as the primary oppressors of Black women. This narrative, reinforced by both white and Black trans-identified males today, absolves men of their treachery. Black trans-identified males similarly obscure the central role of Black men and the betrayal of Black women by presenting themselves as what they believe to be women suffering from oppression. Yet they can never be women. What they are truly attempting is not marginalization but absolution, an escape from the weight of Black masculinity, which has offered them limited prospects into the more advantageous position of Black womanhood. Black trans-identified males singularly obscure the central role of Black men in the betrayal of Black women by presenting themselves as what they believe to be women. The problem is that this performance lacks intellectual and historical grounding. Their selective amnesia enables them to forget how Black women were treated at their hands when they occupied the position of men and when they throw on woman face. Putting on a dress does not absolve them of that history, nor does it undo the cultural conditioning that once led them to ridicule and demean Black women in order to carve out their own place in a society that denied them full access to power. Intersectionality repurposed for male power. In 1989, Kimberlé Crenshaw introduced the term intersectionality in a groundbreaking law review article that analyzed the case de Graffenried versus General Motors 1976. In that case, a group of Black women sued General Motors for employment discrimination after being denied positions. The court dismissed their claim, reasoning that the company did employ both Black people and women, yet the women were white and the Black employees were men. The specific discrimination faced by Black women was therefore rendered invisible, as neither race nor sex alone captured their exclusion. Crenshaw coined intersectionality to name this gap, the ways in which overlapping structures of oppression erased Black women from recognition and redress. As I argue in my book, it is crucial to remember that Crenshaw's framework was never designed to justify the inclusion of men in the category of women. Intersectionality arose from and for the specificity of Black women's lived experiences. Yet, in more recent years, Crenshaw herself has extended her concept to accommodate trans ideology, a move that illustrates the pressure placed on academics and public figures to conform. Given the political climate, this shift was predictable. To refuse would have been framed as professional heresy, if not outright career suicide. When I speak of intersectionality in this context, I am returning to its original meaning as articulated by Kimberlé Crenshaw before the concept was co-opted and distorted. At its inception, intersectionality was a framework created by a Black woman to explain the unique forms of oppression faced by Black women, forms that could not be reduced to race alone or to sex alone. Yet what we see today is a hijacking. The trans community has seized upon the language of intersectionality, twisting it to serve male perversions and recasting it as a justification for why men should occupy women's spaces. This strips the concept from its roots in Black women's lived realities and retools it into a weapon of coercion, one that pressures women into recognizing men as female. The irony is stark. A framework forged to illuminate the invisibility of Black women has been appropriated to make women invisible once again. The trick these men perform with intersectionality and the way they weaponize it against white women is by claiming that Black women were never regarded as women by anyone, and that intersectionality is therefore essential to explain their exclusion. But this use of the term is disingenuous. It flips Crenshaw's original intent and remolds it to fit the fetishistic man seeking to center himself by driving a wedge into what was once a precise and airtight concept. To secure his own inclusion, He simply altered the terminology. And because Black women's voices are so often disregarded, his revision went largely unchallenged. His version of intersectionality, predictably, expanded to include himself and all the features of his project: the assertion that men can be women, the normalization of sex work, the mutilation of children, and other distortions that have nothing to do with the original framework. What began as a tool to describe the compounded oppression of Black women has been manipulated into a weapon that erases women entirely, while serving the interests of men. And because he is male, because he is masculine, and because he dwells in the house of violence, his version of events reigns supreme. Women have been conditioned not to read other women, which leaves space for his distortions to take hold. This is how our histories are repurposed, misconstrued, and shattered. This fixation with his own erection drives him to extraordinary lengths, forcing everyone else to contend with his perversion. The hijacking of intersectionality drags a framework born of women's reality into a male space saturated with sex, racism, and the deliberate preoccupation with the dividing of women. Not as a tool of truth, but as a male weapon to insert himself and drive a wedge between Black and white women, a wedge that serves him directly. He profits from this division by pandering to Black women through a corrupted version of intersectionality, not by honoring its original context, but by weaponizing history. At the same time, he punishes white women for behaviors that men before him not only advocated, but actively conditioned her to embrace. In doing so, he absolves himself of accountability and ensures yet again that women bear the blame for divisions created and enforced by men. Thank you all for listening. Stay sturdy.
Oh, yeah. Stop share. Oh, sorry, everybody. Stop share. Put my video on. Right. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for staying. Wasn't that interesting? It's such a shame Pliers couldn't be there, but various people have put different ways of contacting her. You can get her book, and we'll try and get her on another time. But it's really interesting, isn't it? I'd like to say thank you so much to everybody who's been here. We've had quite a long summer break, which was great. Well, summer for us in the Northern Hemisphere. It's really been a massive pleasure to have Mariah Burton Nelson and Jocelyn Crawley here. Thank you so much to both of you two. It was
Pleasure
just
here too.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. And it's we've been doing these webinars. I don't know how long for. It's a long time now. It's a break lockdown. So 2020, April 2020, we started. And it's such a massive privilege now to have, like today, we've been going for so long, and to have two women I've never been face to face with before who are totally brilliant and inspiring. And then we've had Pliers book and video. You know, it's just great, and it makes I feel really optimistic we can do this with you two and Pliers and everybody here. So thank you very much, everybody. Okay, so we'll end the webinar now. There's the breakout room. We've put the link in. Mariah and Jocelyn, I will email you the link as well in case you didn't manage to pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah, so the breakout room in case you need to go or want to go. And then everybody else, have a nice time, have a nice rest of your week, and see you next week. Okay, bye-bye. Bye.